everyone. Good morning. October 28th, just 3 days until Halloween. Just a side note, I'm thinking that Halloween was always so much fun in school. God, if there's one day I would like to get rid of for the year, it would be Halloween in school. Not that it was scary, it was just never a good experience. Maybe, Jared, you probably had a good experience with that.
There's going to be a good experience this year because Halloween's on a Sunday and we do not have students during Halloween. So,
well, obviously your students haven't figured out that Friday is a day that falls. If it falls on Saturday or Sunday, you celebrate on Friday. Yeah, that was kind of scary. But also, this is the kind of time of year when some seniors start taking stock of where they are in relationship to where they'd like to be when it comes to May. Even some of the students who were what you would assume wouldn't be worrying about it would sometimes be interested in, am I going to make it for the Kansas qualified admissions, or am I going to get some award or recognition, and I don't know. This is always a fun time of the year. Got Halloween and Thanksgiving, and the semester's coming to an end, and seniors are maybe transitioning, maybe not. But graduation requirements is certainly one of those things that as high school principals we would be focused on, during the probably starting around now after the first semester's halfway point is passed, thinking about where we're going next. So when I think about this, we did have, to let you all know, the graduation that the subcommittee chairs and Jared and I did meet last week to, one thing, just to introduce ourselves in person. I'd never met the subcommittee chairs or Jared in person. So that was a great opportunity. And I feel like, quite frankly, that there's just a piece missing, that we don't get the chance to come together and have conversations and get to know each other and our backgrounds as we work together on the graduation task force. But we're going to continue to meet by Zoom. But it was a good experience for us to get together and talk about graduation and hear firsthand the progress that the subcommittees are making. I just think about how much work you've done, and I don't know, we still have a lot of work in front of us, but the groundwork has been made and we're ready to go. And Jared, you're going to talk about what we can kind of look at it from the point of view of the calendar coming up and where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I just want to pull this up real quick and show everybody and continue to remind ourselves why we're doing this. Remember the state board, and I think I may have read this last meeting. A successful Kansas high school graduate has the academic preparation, the cognitive preparation, technical skills, employability skills, and civic engagement to be successful in post-secondary education, in the attainment of an industry-recognized certification, or in the workforce without the need of remediation. So I want to just bring that up because I want us, as we continue to get closer to the end of this semester and that January date where those subcommittees are going to have a report ready to roll, and then we get closer to May, that this needs to continue to be our target. And I think as you look at things where, we talked a lot about change, and it's been however many years since the grad requirements have changed. And I think whenever you look at change, you have to always remember what your why is and why we're doing it. And I think the focus continues to need to be on our students, each and every student. As I sit in the different and listen to the subcommittee leaders and different people from different parts of the state, each community has different needs. And, my community is going to be different than someone out in Western Kansas or in Southern Kansas. And I think as we go through this process and try to do what's best for kids, we have to remember that that we're just the equity piece and how we're making this applicable to all students and all schools as we move forward. And so I will kind of second what Jim said. We had an outstanding meeting the other day to go through to see where we're at and some of that progress. We're really focused on the task at hand, and I think we're getting closer to coming up with some solutions. And I will say that the next 2 or 3 meetings, I think, are potentially maybe some of the most important meetings we're going to have moving forward with those subcommittee times. As we meet today to really start to focus in on what's a product. I mean, ultimately, this group we want to produce something. I know we've had some really meaningful conversations, and we have made a ton of progress. But what's the end product that we're going to come up with? And so today and then in November will be pretty important meetings as we get closer to that December date. We start talking a little bit about some other factors too, as we start putting together some pieces and you start thinking about how do things like special ed fit into some of our decisions? How do early grads, how do they play a big part of that? And what does that look like? Or the funding piece, that's been a lot of questions that we've had about seat time and how does that relate to the things that we're putting together? So I think as we dive into these next 2 meetings, today and November, really need to try to stay focused on what is that product that we're trying to produce. And we had some good conversations. Like I said, we had some outstanding committee leaders. Christy, Ed, and Kelly, you guys are really doing a good job of leading that charge and kind of narrowing down and putting some things on paper. As we get into December, we've talked to Jim and Dr. Watson. We're going to put together the hope is we're going to put together a short report for the board in December, kind of an update, I guess you could say, of where this task force is going. And so that's something that the subcommittee leaders, myself and Jim will formulate to kind of present to the board to give them an update of where we're at. And then December 16th is really kind of our last meeting before a little holiday break. And then we'll be ready to come back in January with a report ready to go. So I'm not going to use the word, I hope we have something. I'm going to go ahead and say we will have something put together by then. And we'll figure it out. And I think that's the thing that I love being a part of this group is we're just going to put it together and make it happen. And so I just want to thank each and every one of you guys for your input. I have put together a timeline, and really my timeline doesn't go past January at this point. And so I think that February through March and April, that's really something where we're going to continue to communicate with stakeholders. And, Peggy has been working, and Peggy, I so much appreciate the work that you have done. I think we're going to have to give you more than just a pat on the back after we get completed with all this, but we have a 1-pager that Peggy's really worked to organize for us that we will get out to stakeholders at the appropriate time. I don't know if we're quite ready to get that out yet. Stakeholders will have an opportunity. I put together a Google form, and I'd love to at some point share that with this group to get some feedback on that. But really, our goal is to get any and every opportunity for people to give feedback. So whether it's electronic, whether it's verbal, written, whatever that looks like, people need all sorts of different avenues to be able to give that feedback. Some people will give feedback and some people won't. You give them that opportunity and they won't. But I think it's important to give everyone a voice as we move forward and begin to make those big changes. So Jim, did you have anything to add on the stakeholders and kind of where we're at on that?
Well, as you said, Jared, we've kind of decided to hold off on the stakeholders a little bit right now and have more of a product to bring forward that they can respond to and then give their recommendations rather than start with recommendations and then have to follow up with responding to the product. So yes, we need to have a more committed product to have stakeholders respond to. I don't know about you, Jared, but I've had a number of people already contact me, and some have sent complete graduation requirement templates, and some of them are really good. It's kind of interesting how close many some of the ones who aren't even on the task force come together. But it will be important that we provide stakeholders an opportunity to speak up, and that doesn't mean that everybody's going to have the same megaphone. Some will just reply online. Some will reply within a group. Some will reply as individuals, and some stakeholders will have a larger voice than others, depending on who they represent and how we value their information. But all stakeholders will be appreciated and respected in terms of what they have to say. The one I like the best is just make it hard. It shouldn't be easy to graduate. Gotta love these. That was from a person who is actually in the mid-70s and a friend of mine. And so I asked him when he graduated, and he said, well, in 1965. And I said, well, in 1965, you're not even halfway to where we are today. And he was telling me how hard it was. They didn't have to do algebra. They didn't have to, really, it was only like 16 credits, and they don't get that. The world has changed. Graduation requirements are going to be that thing that links the past and present and the future. And it is going to prepare our students for a future that, quite frankly, may be a little unknown for them. But this will be a basis for moving forward. So, Jared, I think, is Peggy ready for us?
I think she is. Peggy, are we all good?
We are. Here we
Okay.
go.
There we go.
Okay, thank you all, and we'll talk after the breakouts.
back, everyone. I can speak for our group. We had an outstanding conversation, and I feel really good about where we're at. And so we'll give a little bit of time here for the subcommittee leaders to kind of give a little presentation on where we're at right now and how we move forward. So, Christy, you want to start with your group?
Sure. As always, we had a very robust conversation. We were in the middle of it. It was like one of those things, like, I feel like we just could keep talking about it all morning long. But we are getting closer. We really are focusing in on the need to have groupings of credits to allow flexibility in related to the students' future, their IPS system. So we're starting to have the conversation of adding, in addition to what we have right now, almost a required elective group. Right now, there's a lot of electives that are open. So we're having a conversation about adding a group for future employability skills, et cetera, where we're basically requiring or encouraging students to explore those options in addition to the requirements of like science, social studies, English, et cetera. So we're getting closer, but little by little.
Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Rains, Ed?
I'm here. I
There
just
you
had to
are.
jump, I just had to jump back on. We were Google Meet in another universe, and then we had to jump back here. So our conversation, Melanie, are you back on as well? Okay, there you are. I'll talk about what our small group was, the discussion that we had, and then maybe Melanie can address hers. So the group 3 question was, how do we remove barriers or address the barriers that are going to be presented by the education community, administrators, school board members, teachers, et cetera. So real specific in terms of developing strategies. And the one that we talked about today for quite a while was funding options. And that's a real concern for smaller districts. If we have kids graduating at the end of their junior year because they've demonstrated the competency in the classes that they need to demonstrate competency in, how is that going to affect our funding? It's a real thing. So we talked about funding models that aren't based necessarily on head counts every year, but based on perhaps funding a freshman cohort and taking that number of students and following them for 4 years, or even funding through the end of the junior year, taking the current pot of money that we have and spreading that over the kids at the secondary level during the first 3 years of high school. That way, school districts aren't penalized for a kid that does graduate at the end of the junior year. So the funding would still stay intact, but it allows you to do some things in terms of competency-based education and remove that barrier, that financial barrier that school districts are considering. So we talked about that. Just as we came back to our large group, we started talking about the whole notion of grades and how do you convert competency-based measures into something that's comprehensible for colleges, for schools, or for colleges, post-secondary institutions, those kinds of things. So good discussion. We're getting ideas down, recommendations and strategies down, but we have a lot of things that we've identified as barriers that we're working through. So Melanie?
Thank you. I had to run a couple of devices here, so now I've picked up a fancy background. We had a really good conversation in our subgroup about essentially diving deeper into the stakeholders and how we're going to have those conversations with a variety of different folks. And so we agreed to take away some homework where everyone in our group is going to have a few additional conversations and really focus on which parts of this conversation are well received and where we get questions from various stakeholder groups as we begin to talk about what it might look like to make changes to graduation requirements. But something that the group, I think, really latched onto was the idea that we're already doing a lot of these things that we're having these conversations about making big changes. But in effect, a lot of these big changes have already taken place in other ways, in smaller ways, and are already happening in classrooms with regards to scoring, taking away letter grades and making a shift to rubrics and including students in that part of the grading process. So we've already started to introduce a lot of these changes, and there's that marketing opportunity really to come back and talk to people about how they've already witnessed a lot of the change that's going to take place. We're just going to see it on a grander scale. And so I think that the next phase of this conversation for this group will be to really dig a little bit deeper into the why, and then how we turn that why into a conversation that we can have with the greater public when we really think about what all of those different stakeholder groups look like and what kinds of questions they're going to have, and then what sorts of answers they need to hear from us so that they can be comfortable in the process and that they can embrace the kinds of changes that are coming forward, and they don't perceive it as a threat to the old way of doing things. It's simply a little bit more of the new, and it's a little bit more of a flexible system. Thanks.
That's awesome. Thank you, Melanie, Ed, appreciate it. Kelly, subgroup number 3.
Yes, like the other groups, we had a lot of great discussion here this morning with our added value diplomas or market value assets. We had considerable discussion as far as, as the list that we're kind of looking at. We want to make sure that what and if they meet the requirements. Actually, the number we're still kicking around. What should be the recommendation as far as how many they should have, and whether it meets the definition of a market value asset or an added value diploma. We also are making sure and trying to keep in mind that flexibility is very, very important for us to continue with, so that local schools and districts have the flexibility to add those things if they need to, or that may be something that's not on the list. We also want to make sure that it's not going to become a barrier for kids to earn their diploma as well. And so we would also like to see that in ensuring and getting our private sector involved with meeting the market value assets or added value diplomas. So, and I think one of the key things for all of this is that IPS that we've talked about, and that's being required now, that making sure that senior year is meaningful, it's purposeful. And if we do that, the kids then should be able to meet having a added value diploma or market value asset as they graduate high school.
Okay, and I thank you, Kelly. And I just want to add to, as we listen to all three of the subcommittee groups, what those big 3 letters, IPS. Okay, and I think that's something that as we move forward and continue to come up with our recommendations, is that I think we're seeing the value of what that IPS is, and maybe how, as school districts, we need to continue to, I know the challenges as a principal of what that is with working with the IPS and meeting with kids and developing those plans. And I can empathize with how much work that takes and how much staff that takes. But I think also, as I go through this process, I see it's important and it's vital to see those kids. One thing we talked about in our group, I think Lana mentioned this, was, those, as we grab those kids as their middle school to freshman year is where we lose a lot of kids. I don't know if anybody would disagree with me on that. What's the class that kids fail the most? Is it Algebra 1? Those kids that they lose credits freshman year, and then what do we do the next 3 years as we work on trying to gain those credits back? And so if we're able to identify, what their passions are through that IPS, through this entire process, whatever courses they're taking, how they're getting those courses, being able to engage in them, I think we're gonna get there. And so I think that as we go through here, that individual plans of study is going to be so important. And maybe it's something we can continue to focus on to value that more. It's not that we don't value that. I think across the state, but I think it maybe can bring more light to it. So So awesome discussions today. I feel really good about where we're at and making some good progress. You know, our next meeting is on November 18th. And from what I am hearing here, everyone has a little bit of homework before November 18th to work on. Jim, I'm gonna let you close up here. I don't have a whole lot else. I'd love for the subcommittee leaders to stay on for just a few minutes if you have time after the meeting's over. But Jim, if you want to close this out with any closing thoughts.
Well, thank you, Jared, and great summary of where we are and the progress we've made. And I really have to thank the subcommittee chairs as well as all the members of the task force for just the amazing conversations that are going on within the task force. It has just been a real joy, and listening to the summaries here, I am reminded of the progress we have made to date. You know, the conversations are coming so much more valuable and so much more insightful, and becoming aware of the challenges that we face as we move forward. It's just been a real joy, you know, to be a part of this. So, Jared, our next meeting is November 18th. Is that right? You know, boy, hard to believe. And then also, Jared, we'll be talking about the report that we're going to make to the board in December. You know, not a report. It's going to be a midway update. We still have a target that May is our concluding, May 20th, I believe, is the concluding presentation. Or in May, we'll make the report of the task force to the state board, the official report. But we made great progress, and thank you to everyone. I look forward to our next meeting. And Jared, we'll spend a few more minutes with the subcommittee chairs, and then we'll move on. So, hey, have a happy Halloween, and we'll talk to you again in November. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, everybody.